Alright, we're here. So as some of you noted in the Mac and Rita video last week, which I'm sorry that you had to get a Mac and Rita video last week, but you did. August isn't really the best month for movies, and I didn't really clock that until y'all mentioned it. I don't know if you watched this video that I made a while ago. It was about the best summer for cinema, which I think is 2018 in recent memory. August was really the month where things started to slow down, and unfortunately this year is going right along with that pattern, because this week the major release in theaters is Beast, starring Idris Elba, the self-proclaimed horror movie about a lion that has gone crazy, savage rampage, killing spree. That's what the movie is. Let's talk about whether it's good or not. I bet you can guess which one it is. So let's talk about good things, because, you know, we want to do that and get those out of the way first. Good things in this film, I guess the most prominent thing would probably be the acting. It's very hard to give Idris Elba a role in him to not be good in it. He's basically good in just about everything that he does, and he's able to be a relatively charismatic, relatively concerned, emotionally relatable protagonist, widowed father who is dealing with a lot of stressful and strenuous emotions with his two daughters, and he plays it pretty well. He also looks the role really well. Also, the standout of this film for me actually is the youngest daughter, played by Lisa Jeffries, who is in the new Percy Jackson show. She is really good. She is most in tune with her emotions than anyone else that I actually saw in this movie. And she portrays this wounded daughter who's constantly getting between the father and the most hurt daughter, who kind of gets overlooked in the process. And, you know, I think she is just phenomenal here. The other name attached to this project is Sharlto Copley, and I am a big proponent of Sharlto Copley. I absolutely adored him. I think he is what carried Hardcore Henry. I think Hardcore Henry is overall just an average film, but with Sharlto Copley in that, he is just amazing, really good, and he is pretty good here. He doesn't really get as much time to shine on screen as the other three characters, but he is good. And the worst performance out of that core four is Iana Halley, but at the same time, she is pretty solid. Sometimes she just has a habit of overacting when it comes to emotions and underacting at other times. Very either extreme of the spectrum, and isn't able to really hit that middle ground in the way that you would want to see from a character going through that level of grief. Another good thing, you know what? And I didn't think that I would think this from the trailer. The CGI is not bad. It's not great, but in a film like this where it plays such a prevalent role, where the CGI is so important to be locked down, to have it look decent is just enough for me. I would take that over the abomination of a Lion King CGI fest that was, and it's pretty solid. There are certain points where it actually does look kind of real. There are also points where, you know, the characters are interacting with like the hair on the lions and they don't move properly, but you know, I was expecting much worse from this and it gave me better than what I expected. So I do have to commend it on that. And the final positive that I will give this movie is that the action scenes, for the most part, at least through the first two acts, are pretty well done. They are pretty intense and they do kind of grip you in a certain way. And I enjoyed them for the most part, but that leads into the more negative side of things, so let's talk about that. So I do have a big problem with Beast, and it's a big problem that's kind of universal in regards to these types of survival thrillers that you see in the mainstream nowadays, and that is that it is super predictable. There are absolutely no stakes in these films. you always have the core group of characters that you know are going to stay alive. For example, Idris Elba and his 2 daughters. Spoiler alert, they don't die, but you know that they're not going to die. There's no doubt in your mind that they're going to live. They're too important to the film, and you're not going to kill off people who just suffered that grief that they need to fully come to an arc with, which we'll get into later. There's also an expendable character that is not as on screen as much as the other 3 that you know is going to die at a certain point, because there has to be some sort of sacrifice to make the movie even remotely tense. But it's not, because you know that it's going to happen. There's such a formulaic, like, straight plot line laid out for these types of movies that is just kind of insufferable to me, to the point where the movie gets to be incredibly boring. And speaking of boring, my God, is this film boring? Listen, this is a film where you take risks. This is a film where you have one gimmick, and it is you are filming a family fighting for their lives, trying to survive against a crazed and deranged lion. That is the entire point of this film. That's it. That's all you have. You don't have, like, really plot development. You don't really have character development, although they do try to force that in. Again, we'll get there. But that's what you have. In order to make that interesting, you need to really be out there with your cinematic techniques. You need to have cinematography, like brilliant, like billowing drone shots, very, very interesting angles to be shooting at. You need to be constantly in the action, doing things that aren't usually done in order to entice the audience to keep paying attention. And the cinematography in this is flat. The editing is just basic. There's nothing to write home about on the technical side, and it makes it a slog to get through, because you're just watching a family say the same dialogue over and over again, trying to survive from a lion. There's only a certain amount of ways that you can fight a lion. I did learn that from watching this movie, because they did the same tactics over and over again. And it was just kind of rough to get through. Speaking of rough to get through, let's wrap this whole thing up by talking about the character development. The whole thing about this movie is Idris Elba's wife, who he had separated from, passed away from cancer, and he's kind of dealing with the fallout from that, thinking with his daughters, thinking that he left her just to die, and he left them and didn't really care about the whole situation. This is touched on maybe 4 times, and 3 of the 4 times that it's touched on at very inappropriate times where it should not be touched on. And it's always touched on a very, very surface level that doesn't get any deeper than, I should have been there more. It was hard to deal with the grief. And it just sounds like a bunch of buzzwords put together without any actual emotional attachment or force put behind those words. It just sounds like a string of sentences that you hear in like daytime soaps to describe any basic emotion that someone's going through, and putting them all together with absolutely no cohesion or no actual attachment to the problem that is at hand for these characters. There's nothing there. It's completely void of any type of empathy or anything like that. And also, there's a bunch of dream sequences that happen in the film that simply make no sense. So there's that too. Beast is a pretty accessible thriller that mainstream audiences will enjoy. They don't really have to invest much into it, thought-wise or emotionally. They can just kind of sit back and enjoy the ride play out. But that's just kind of all it's worth. Time at the theater with your friends, hanging out, watching a movie. And that's that. There's nothing more to it than that. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I am going to give Beast a 4 out of 10. It's not offensively bad, but it certainly doesn't have any excellent proponents to it. It's just there. And if you want to watch something that's just there, you can go see Beast in theaters this weekend. All right, that is all for this video. I hope you are having a wonderful day. I'm not sure if I'm going to do another review this weekend. Probably not. I'm probably going to say that for next weekend for 30,000 Years of Longing, something like that. I can't remember what exactly it's called right now, and The Invitation. So I'll probably do that next weekend. And then keep in mind, Monday is my Comfort Films video. I'm excited to make that. All right, so have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will talk to you in the next one. Goodbye.